Hey, what's up, my people? John Middlekauff, new YouTube channel. What I need you to do, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Appreciate everyone that has. It's the podcast, 3 and Out. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We got you covered. Also, thevolume.com. We got merch right here. FlexFit hat. Go to thevolume.com. Get yourself a 3 and Out hat. What is going on, everybody? Fugazi Friday. How are we all doing? I know I'm doing great. Nothing too crazy today. Just something we all noticed that watched the roast. You're like, God, this relationship seems a little weird. And that's not Tom and Bill, who I wouldn't call BFFs, but clearly, like, they got a pretty good relationship going on right now. The Robert Kraft Belichick thing that's happening is the new modern day Jerry Jones, Jimmy Johnson. And Julian Edelman, who I want to play something today that he said on his podcast with Drew Bledsoe, I mean, couldn't have hammered it home any harder. And something with Netflix in regards to Christmas Day football. Streaming's here to stay, baby, obviously. But when it comes to football, buckle up, because this is only the beginning. And then, of course, Fugazi Friday. But before we dive into some football, got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Gametime. Listen, these NHL hockey games, I don't pretend to be some big hockey guy, but when I'm flipping around or turn on the TV at night, like during dinner or after dinner, and I see a hockey game on, I'm minimum watching it for 10 minutes. They have been fantastic. And if you live in one of these areas, want to go to a game, NBA playoff game, obviously the summer's kicking off, baseball's in full swing, concerts, comedy shows, I got you covered. Gametime, fastest growing ticketing app in America. Very, very consumer friendly. The user application doesn't get any easier. And I've used them all, but I've only used Gametime for about the last 2 years because personally I think they're the best and highly recommend them to everyone listening. If you want to go to anything, concerts, comedy shows, games, I got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You know what's funny is when things go poorly, and I've been part of different businesses over my life in radio and early on some startup companies with podcasts before I got linked up with Colin that didn't go well, and talking to, my friends in different businesses that have tried different things from an entrepreneurial standpoint, try starting business, and they fail, people point fingers. Now, most of these businesses are not very public, so you never hear about them. But we have been seeing in professional sports, when shit hits the fan, everyone points the finger at someone else. I actually think it's kind of a basic instinct for human beings. Think about when you're a little kid, anyone with siblings, when you get in trouble or with your friends, you never take responsibility. You always blame someone else, even if you did it. And it's kind of a natural reaction. Now, the older you get and more professional, some people are clearly more cutthroat than others. They would do the Joe Pesci meme in Goodfellas. They'll take you out to survive. And I also think survival for a lot of people in business is almost more important than their actual job performance. They'll do whatever it takes to survive. So the easiest thing when things are not going well, which is inevitable, I don't care what business you're in, is to say it's not my fault. It's someone else's fault. I would have done this different. It wasn't my idea. That guy screwed it up. That guy's the moron. We replaced that person. We changed this that I had nothing to do with. We'll make it. And then you can keep going down that, taking that stance the rest of your career. And a lot of people do it. And if you get in with the right people, right? If you're an employee and the owner likes you, the main CEO likes you, it's easy to do that and survive. We've all known people that do it. I saw it in the radio industry when I worked in it for about 4 years with a ton of guys. It wasn't about how good they were at their job. And I'm not even talking about hosts. I'm talking about people that worked for the company. It was about surviving and keeping that job, which I understand, because the number one thing that humans, the older you get, I was talking to someone about this the other day because they thought they were getting screwed. And I said, listen, I don't think this person's necessarily trying to screw you, but first and foremost, they care about themselves and they care about their family. And if they view you as like, you don't need the money, you're rich, or you've made a lot of money, it's easy to justify. And ultimately, and listen, a lot of people are like this. I have to do what I have to do. And I think in sports, we've all seen this happen forever. When teams lose, GMs, coaches, players, but mainly GMs and coaches, point the finger at other people and try to get them fired, try to get them removed, and say it was their fault. In football, it happens all the time. The GM points the finger at the coach. And if not the head coach, the coordinators. And that's why there's constant turnover at those positions. But actually, when you have success, is a time when a lot of people, especially, highly public figures, struggle with that. And I remember when I first got into kind of radio and out of the NFL and started doing whatever the hell I do now, I saw with Jed York and Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was bigger than every player on the team, and that team had star players everywhere. And he got the majority of the credit. And Jed York and Trent Baalke did not like that. Now, Jed was young, and Trent, who I like, I mean, he's been cool to me in my dealings with him over the years. But a lot of people think he's kind of an ego, crazy, power-hungry maniac. And they didn't get the credit. Jim got it all. And then they inevitably fired Jim Harbaugh. Now, the good thing about some of these, it happened with Jerry Jones, obviously, and Jimmy Johnson, which I would say is one of the more famous ones in NFL history. And it took them 25 years to get back together. And most of this is not usually over money because you're dealing with rich people. Now, the money when Jimmy and Jerry broke up was a lot different than the modern day NFL. But when you see these things happen, specifically Bill and Kraft, it has nothing to do with one penny, let alone millions of dollars. Kraft is a billionaire and Bill is worth a shitload. It's all about ego. And we noticed it on the roast because you're like, God, this is kind of weird at the end. And then Julian Edelman had Drew Bledsoe on his podcast and brought it up. And he hammered it home. It's actually worse than you think. Let's take a listen.
The tension in that room, though.
It was real.
Could cut fucking glass.
It was very real. It was very real.
I was so awkward. I was watching Coach, and I tried to give Coach a heads up. I'm like, I see Kraft walk in. I'm like, yo, Coach. Woo! Some locker room shit, like 5-0, 5-0. He did. Of course, he didn't fucking see it.
Right.
And he came in, and I was just like, oh, shit, this is going to be fireworks. I just walked away.
To me, the craziest part about this, let's use the Jim and Jed York example. When those guys had their falling out and they mutually departed, a.k.a. fired Jim, Jim was like 50 years old. Jed was in his early 30s. Time was on their side. And a couple years ago, they had a reunion for like the 2012 team that lost in the Super Bowl. And Jim came. And now everyone's friends. Now, I'm not saying they're BFFs. They're not sending each other Christmas cards. Probably, maybe they do. But it's like, time happens. I remember being a kid and having some family issues. Not with my immediate family, but just uncles and aunts and people not talking and thinking, God, this is pretty chaotic. This is, in my close couple friends, didn't really have that. And then the older you get, you meet a bunch more people. You realize, yeah, I wasn't alone. Happens to a lot of people. Most people's family, I think we could say in some form or fashion, kind of messed up. There is no perfect family. And it makes you realize, yeah. And over time, everyone gets back together, hopefully, and you figure things out. And it might never be the same, but it's not as acrimonious as it once was. Why? Because over time brings you perspective. You realize life's short. What were we actually arguing over? What were our actual issues? And you put them aside. Jerry, I would say, is probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest egos in the league. And Jimmy probably does too. And it took them 25 years. But when they broke up, both guys, I didn't write down their age, but I would guess, mid 40s, late 40s, early 50s. So if they're going to live till they're 80 or 85, like they got some time. And they finally got back together. Belichick and Kraft, who clearly despise each other. Kraft has hated him and told people publicly, it's been well reported on, for a long, long time. Can't stand him. And like Bill's not the easiest guy to deal with. Fired. And it's one thing, listen, teams struggle, guys get fired. Welcome to pro sports. But that documentary was an all-time FU to Bill, and Bill even used it in the roast. Here's the problem. I don't see any making up. Bill is 72, 73 years old. Robert Kraft is 82. One of these guys is going to take this situation to the grave because it ain't getting fixed. It just is not. And I think it makes you realize most things end pretty poorly. Most great things kind of crash and burn. In the history of time, right? It's used as an analogy all the time. Well, even Rome fell. You see it with some of these companies. Like, is Apple going to stay on top forever? Probably not. History of time would show you that's not usually the way it works out. And you look at this situation, they saw unprecedented success. And ultimately, their downfall wasn't the last couple years of losing, which sucked. But it's football. You have some bad years. Like Andy had a couple bad years in Philadelphia. Him and Jeffrey Lurie are still good buddies. It was about Robert Kraft's refusal, because ultimately we can argue till we're blue in the face. Brady, Belichick, Belichick, Brady. We know both guys had a big role. However you want to put it on the pie chart, 60-40 Brady, 70-30 Brady, 50-50. It was those two guys. Robert Kraft, let's face it, didn't do a goddamn thing. And that bothered him. Just like it bothered Jerry back in the day. Why? He wanted to be the star. And let's face it, Robert Kraft kind of likes being a star. He kind of does. He likes being a big deal. Look at who he's running around with. Robert Kraft, I never see him running around with other guys 80 years old. He likes running around with the cool guys. He likes trying to be a real cool guy. And it seems like people have liked him over the years. But in this situation, like, I'm sorry, just give him his flowers and move on. But that Kraft family clearly right now hates him. And I would say based on Belichick's history, pretty petty guy. Not one to just be like, yeah, messed up, screwed up, my bad. He's 82 years old. If he lives 3 more years, that's an incredible life. How many people you know live till 85? Short list. My dad didn't sniff 85. So you just kind of sad, but also pretty predictable. The Bulls, we saw that Last Dance. All those guys, they hated the GM. Michael doesn't ever do anything with the Bulls. Scotty and Michael hate each other. It's all over egos because it's easy to point the finger at someone else when things are shitty. What about when things go great? Who actually gets the credit? And it's a downfall of all of ours because we all like to raise our hand and probably get more credit than we deserve. The NBA playoffs are heating up, and so is the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out as the NBA postseason winds down. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Netflix. I defended Amazon Prime a couple years ago when they got Thursday Night Football, and I even defended Peacock last year when a lot of people pushed back. I understand not everyone has unlimited money to buy all these things, but the reality of the television industry is the cable box is DOA, and it's never coming back. What we have gotten used to over the last 15, 20 years is never going to be the same. So the world we live in right now, we're at the early stages. Even though Netflix has been around a while and Hulu and some of these companies now, it's not like they're 1 year old, but their impact when it comes to the way we consume things is at the very, very beginning. And Boomer Esiason said on his radio show that look for Netflix to get the Christmas games. And most people will be like, oh, why not just put it on CBS, put it on ABC? You do understand that those channels, how we view them right now, there's a chance in 10 years they will not be around. There's a chance in 5 years it's not even possible to get the cable box. It will not exist. It probably will, but if you don't think there's a chance, then I don't know what world you're living in. Now, I understand that depending on where you live, having the power of the internet is important to streaming on your television. And that impacts how you are as a viewer, and that sucks. I can't relate because I spent a lot of money. I have what's it called? Not hardwired, but not the DSL, but the other. I can't. My brain's not working. I don't know why. The good internet. Now, granted, I need it for my job, but Netflix is gonna get a Christmas game. It clearly looks like. And I actually think the Tom Brady roast is a good example. And I'll just use me as a consumer. My mom watches Netflix every day. She's in her mid-70s. When I lay down at bed at night, like when we get in bed, after you brush your teeth or whatever, you're just going to watch a television show. We never go to YouTube TV, which is obviously not the cable box, but just where you would watch television. The first place we go, and I think the first place most people go, is Netflix. I have sympathy if you had to download and pay for the Peacock app because that's not something that everyone has and is like consistently in everyone's home. It's in mine because she loves whether it's Below Deck or Summer House and some of the Bravo shows. And I would imagine a lot of people my age, either their girlfriend or wife, uses Peacock heavily because of that catalog. I don't really watch it beside for it usually has golf stuff for like the US Open, so I've used it before. But I don't think we can say that about Netflix. And I actually think Tom Brady, the roast, is a good example. And it'll be fascinating once the news finally leaks of how many people have watched that show, if it ever does. But I think a large contingent of people just stumbled upon it. Like in 1998, when I would just stumble upon, oh, the Grammys are on, or oh, the Oscars are on, or oh, this show is on, which used to happen and doesn't really happen anymore. But the one thing Netflix has, being by far the biggest streaming service, is the power to control everything. Like whenever I see the top 10 trending, are they really the top 10 trending? Or are those the ones they want to put right there? The most popular 10 movies going right now. Are those actually the most watched movies right now? Or is that what they want to promote? And their power to promote this, and that Brady thing, it really stood out. Like they could easily get in bed with Monday night or Sunday night football. When everyone's sitting down, turning on Netflix, boom, Sunday night football on. Everyone's sitting down, turning on, boom, Monday night football's on. And Amazon Prime was kind of the first mover when it came to getting involved from a streaming platform with the NFL. And Thursday night football, let's face it, I'm not saying like the broadcast, I wish it was a little better, but just talking about the product, how easy it is to consume, for me at least, and I think most people, because last year it averaged 13 million people, is a great example. Well, guess what is way more popular as a streaming service than Amazon Prime? Netflix. And like Amazon, who is flush with unlimited money, Netflix. So when you look at this next television deal, I think these partners are in major trouble. NBC is bleeding money right now. And if they spend all this on the NBA, which rumors are they might, they will have no choice but to be aggressive for the NFL. Just like all these networks, they need them. But how can you compete against Netflix? If Apple wanted it, you can't compete against them. There is no competition. It's like putting a Walmart next to your little mom and pop shop. Business is usually done within 12 months. They have absolutely no shot. And Netflix has proven with that, to me, that Tom Brady roast, that like live events can really work. Now, the logistics of would they have to get their own broadcasters, could they just do a partnership with Fox or CBS and just use one of their crews, which I think they gladly would. Or maybe they will just get into the business on their own and buy some trucks and kind of dip their toe. They really can do whatever they want. And I've been saying this forever. The Jerry Jones generation of Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, the older owners, the Rooneys, just the Maras, are going to be very, very loyal to CBS, to NBC, to ABC. Their children simply will not. And honestly, it doesn't even make sense for the older generation, though they can look at the traditional broadcast partners as the ones who made them billions, the ones who essentially bought their yachts. But younger generations aren't loyal when it comes to business. I saw it with my parents. They would use the same people to do the same things no matter what. It's like, Mom, you're going to redo the kitchen? This guy's like screwed up 3 kitchens. Well, we've known this guy for 25 years. He's a good, close personal friend of your dad. We're going to use him. That's not really how me or my friends are wired. Just because I know you, if your work's not good, if your price is too high, I'll go with someone else. And you look at the age of some of these up-and-coming kids, they're not 20 years old, but they're not 70. And these companies are going to be able to throw astronomical amounts of money out there. And I just think that the next go around, the way we're consuming these NFL games in 2030 will not look anywhere near like we're doing it now. And they've dipped their toe enough to start, and they're only getting more and more aggressive. Amazon Prime Thursday night, YouTube TV gets the package. Buckle up, because I'm actually excited. I actually think it's easier. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You know, the first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back, and you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row of seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, Fugazi Friday. We'll bang some out. It's funny, some people push back, some people get angry. It's like, God, everyone, it's fun. It's not that big a deal, First Fugazi Friday. Hope this makes the pod. If you did have hair, because the one thing consistently with Fugazi Friday, everybody forwards me tipping memes, tipping reels. The tipping thing is, I think, one thing we all relate to. If you did have hair, would you tip your barber $10 if it already costs 25 to cut your hair? I'm asking because I usually tip my guy 10 after I pay 25, and he's been cutting my hair for over 5 years now. So I figured it's just a better service. But since watching your rants on the tipping culture, I've been questioning it. Your thoughts? Well, I haven't had hair since 2011. So we're going on a while. I've been bald. And sometimes, as you age, the longer you get away from something, you start thinking, like, what was that like? Definitely, whether it's looking back on memories from college or someone you dated or, a trip you went on, you have the good parts of the memory, but there's a lot missing. Maybe that's just me. Maybe my brain's just kind of doesn't have the capacity of some of you guys. I can't even remember what it was like sitting in a chair and getting my hair cut. Now, I remember being a kid and my dad taking me to the Wrestler Brothers. It was these two guys in Davis that had it, it was the equivalent of like a sports bar, but it was a barber shop. It was cool. Back then, a haircut cost 10, and I think my dad would just give the guy a 20 and would just, classic, just give me a buzz cut every time. Pisses me off thinking about. All I wanted was long hair, and you never would let me grow it out. But and then, obviously then I get older, I don't even have hair. I think it's more than fair. And this is the whole thing with tipping. The only fugazis with tipping is when you're like, God, this service was terrible. Part of giving someone extra money is like, God, you earned that. And I think with a haircut, and again, it's hard for me to speak because I shave my head in a shower, is that, yeah, I think 100% you should tip the guy. Hell, if you really like the guy, I'd get him like a $100 gift card at the end of the year, especially if you go all the time. I'd say $25 haircut in 2024 seems like a pretty good deal. Not really in the mix of the price points for the service, but especially if you like the guy, 100%. I got a lot of DMs on the Fugazis of weddings and the prices. So here's one. Just watch Fugazi Friday. I think big weddings are a Fugazi. My wife and I got married in 21, and COVID gave us an out from having a big, expensive wedding. We rented a huge house with a pool in Cape Coral and had our immediate family and close friends come down, probably 35 people total. Cost us maybe $7,500. And everyone said it was the best wedding they've ever been to. I think weddings are just very, very personal. So I understand people complaining on Friday weddings because you got to take time off work, and especially if you're in it to get to the rehearsal dinner. But I defended that given the cost of it. And let's face it, as someone who's having these conversations, there are much different wants and needs usually of the man and the woman. So I understand it. And depending on your family situation, I saw someone else reach out. Is like, yeah, trust me, I've been to a couple stores. These rings. So it's not even just the wedding. It's the cost of a ring. They are not cheap either. So you factor in all these costs. That's how I would do it, the way that you just described it. But I understand if she wants a great wedding and her family has the money for it. But I don't know. I think the cost of everything, I just understand all the sides when it comes to this. Okay, Fugazi Friday. The Lakers firing Darvin Ham like it's not the front office's fault for not giving him Braun and AD more help to beat the best team in the NBA. I think anytime, and this is my favorite part about the NBA, the Suns a couple hours ago just fired Frank Vogel, is when a coach is fired and these the talk shows that talk about the NBA act like it 100%. Like, think about this. The Bucks have hired multiple coaches in like 12 months. That's Giannis Antetokounmpo. Whenever a LeBron coach gets fired, that is LeBron James. Now, sometimes it's right. Maybe the guy's not any good. But Kevin Durant and Devin Booker just got Frank Vogel fired. That's the way the NBA works. which is what I like about the NFL. If you get fired as a coach in the NFL, your relationships with players, good and bad, it's kind of irrelevant. If you win on Sunday, you will keep your job. If you lose, you will not. If your offense or defense, if your coordinator is not good, you're done. Whether guys like you or they don't like you. It's very, very, black and white. We're in the NBA. It's like, both those situations with the Lakers and the Suns, they weren't even into the locker room as they lost their series. And Shams came out with articles about both, about the deterioration of the relationship, about the schemes, about the rotations. It's like, this is, and I'm not saying these guys are Phil Jackson in his prime, but holy shit, like no one is winning with the Kevin Durant situation. At this point in time, he just wants to show up, score some points, go home, get high. LeBron and Anthony Davis, the team, their third best player or fourth best player is D'Angelo Russell. But this is what happens. We talked about early, pointing the finger. Pelinka always point the finger. The guy's running through coaches like mad. He can just say, well, it's my job to keep up the relationship with LeBron. It's just so fake because the players, the star players who get the coach fired, they never admit to it. They never admit to it. Where it's like, what are we fucking talking? We know you got him fired. We know you did. I would respect if it's like, listen, I didn't think he was any good. He didn't know what he was doing. I didn't respect him at the end. He had to go. Like, yeah, then we've all thought that about our bosses. Most human beings don't have the juice to fire their boss. All of us have worked for incompetent people. Darvin Ham had them in the Western Conference Finals last year. Frank Vogel's proven to be pretty good. So you get with most of these star players, the moment they want you gone, you're gone. It's just that simple. It has nothing to me to do with the front office. The moment Kevin Durant or Devin Booker goes to the owner, says, I want this guy gone, he's gone. I got a Fugazi Friday for you. Paying for Spotify Premium and using to listen to music and podcasts ad-free. Then turn around and the podcast start with 6 minutes of ads. Well, here's the thing. How can Spotify, if I read ads in my podcast, in my content, they can't cut it out? Those ads for us in the podcast business pay a lot. So it's not even a hack. It's just the business. They control ads that they put in. So if I put this podcast on Spotify, you, I'm sure, will hear ads that aren't my voice. And if you pay for the premium, Spotify will take that out. But if I read an ad, they can't remove that. So we've learned ways to get away around that. So I feel you. Luckily, and I've said this, I'm not a cheap guy, but I don't pay for any ad free on any of those. I'll just be like at the gym, listen to Pandora, and all of a sudden I'll get an ad for some, barbecue joint in Fresno. Because back in the day when I signed up for Pandora in like 2010, I lived in Fresno. So still to this day, 15, 14 years later, I still get Fresno ads, between sets, between it depends how 3 or 4 songs. Sometimes if you skip too much, they'll show you an ad. I'm not paying for ad free. I'm loving the Fugazi Fridays. I have one that I've been meaning to throw out for a while and finally remembered to share. Comment sections. Honestly, what are we doing? You read these, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. It's always either I like this or something negative, like your content sucks, which is even funny because that means that person is actually tuning in to something they don't like. Sometimes you have the crowd that chimes in, I totally agree, and then proceeds to restate the same point as the podcaster, like they're trying to make it about them. Very rarely does anyone actually chime in with a new perspective. And even then, I just don't understand the mindset it takes to shout these things into the internet void for a few strangers and likely bots. Maybe I'm crazy. My thing with YouTube is I love listening to live music. So if you just type in whatever you want to hear, and I like typing in whoever the artist is, acoustic. right? If I'm in the mood, if I hear a song at the gym and I get back, it's like boom, boom, acoustic or boom, boom, live. And all the comments would be like, let's just use an example. Like, let's just say I throw on like Metallica acoustic, turn the page from like 1999 or, an old video. All the comments, if you just search newest, will be like, remember when music was great? You just don't hear music like all these losers now playing music would die to sound. Everything in a weird way is like complimentary, but a shot. It's like, yeah, it was just a good song. Like, it's fine. Music today, music always. Do you know what's funny? Is I remember driving around with my dad a lot when I was a kid. He was a farmer, so he used to take me to the fields and stuff, bonding, whatever, drive around. And he listened to music from the 60s and the 70s when he was young and growing up. And for the most part, especially when I was really young, I was like, this music sucks. And then the older you get, you're like, God, I like that music. And you can easily listen to it. And he thought the same about mine. Like, what the fuck are you listening to? It'd be like, Doggy Style from Snoop Dogg. Like, throw on track 3, Dad. And he just didn't like it. But as you get older, you kind of like what your parents listen to. You like what you grew up listening to. And then the new music. Now, I was thinking about this today in the shower. Do new bands exist? Like, do new bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Metallica, and obviously go back well before them, whoever, bands from the 80s, it just felt like the 70s, Ozzy, you name it. They're just bands. Do bands exist? Like, rappers still exist. Country music stars still exist. I also thought, do R&B singers still exist? When I was a kid, 102.5 in Sacramento was the big, like, I would say hip hop channel. But for every rap song, there were multiple R&B songs played. R&B was huge in the 90s. Does that genre exist anymore? I mean, they were some of the biggest stars in music. Boys II Men easily is one of the biggest groups of my life, any genre. When Eddie DeBartolo, when the 49ers shut down Candlestick in, what was the last year he was playing there? 2013. It was the game where Navarro Bowman picked off Matt Ryan, the pick of the stick. It was sweet. I was on the field. It was badass. I was standing right next to Chris Berman. It's one of the coolest moments in my sport life. I remember looking up, the place going nuts. They had a huge, like, after everyone stayed, they had a stage. Eddie DeBartolo's favorite band, I guess, was Boys II Men, and they played a bunch of songs. I think the bass guy is like, I don't know if he got sick or he's not even in the group anymore, but it was only 3 of them. But it hit me the other day, like, it doesn't exist. But I'm telling you, if you're my age or older, go listen to a song from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, and just look at all the comments. It basically is just shitting on music today. And I've never understood. Like, I've always liked music. Like, what kind of music you listen to? I'm like, whatever's good. Like, I listen to more often than not certain things, but if something is good, I'm going to like it. But yet it feels like, at least on the internet, everyone just talking shit. And let's face it, most people are kind of angry. Most people aren't happy. Hell, sometimes I wake up, today's a good example. Just woke up, I wasn't that happy. Didn't feel like smiling. Just felt like not having a bad day, but I wasn't going to have a great day. Not from a production standpoint, but just from, I'm not going to be in a good mood. I just kind of want to be in a bad mood. If I was the equivalent of that, my comments would be negative. And I think majority of people that comment are just in a bad frame of mind. So I'm with you. Now that's why I don't even spend that much time on Twitter anymore, because it's been the same now for like a decade. It's just a bunch of. I've always said it's the Radicals Country Club because there's no entry fee. So anyone who's angry and obsessed with whatever spends time there and just fucking talk shit. And it's all useless and pointless. It's just irrelevant at the end of the day too. So I don't spend very much time in there anymore. I spend way more time on YouTube, but it's easier to avoid the comments there because the point of the app is the video. But when you go through the comments, like, it's kind of the same thing. Now, sometimes you get a powerful thing like, hey, this song really helped me get through a tough time. Like, that's powerful. I think you get some of that too, but I'm with you. I just think comments in general, tend to be pretty negative. Fugazi Friday. Watching First Take this morning, and one of the topics was the WNBA committing $50 million for charter flights. So meaning the NBA is helping out, LOL. It's hilarious to me with some of these topics for professional women's sports. Like, why can't we just be honest like we do in men's sports? I'm not saying these girls or gals aren't professionals or good athletes, but let's be real about it. The best way to actually help women's sports succeed is to move the WNBA and soccer teams to smaller cities that don't have any professional team. And I would bet that they would be much more successful and popular because people actually go to the games. I thought one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my entire life was the reaction to Caitlin Clark's contract. Like, you guys know this league's never turned a profit. Ethan Strauss has been writing about it forever. That the reason that you see the ads, because if me and you own a company and we buy $50 million worth of advertising for the NBA, it's built into the contract that the WNBA gets it too. But the money is going to the NBA, who is subsidizing the WNBA. Now, for the first time, there is someone that I would say universally people are interested in. The college women's basketball has had great players for decades. I mean, superstar players, right? They were very famous in the sporting world. I think Caitlin Clark is past that. Now, once you get that level of hype, you got to live up to it. And if you do, I think she could help the WNBA out a lot, at least for her team and whenever she's playing. And I'm going to pay attention. But you couldn't pay me, like the majority of people I know, to watch one of those games that doesn't have her. Yet all these women associated with the WNBA were all like taking shots at her. Like, are you guys morons? She is your opportunity to be a rocket ship, to make way more money, to bring way more people into the sport. Again, I hate comparing her to this, but I remember when Tiger Woods got on the scene, all the old stiff, guys on tour were all talking shit about him. It's like, do you realize if he's good, his importance to your bank account, it will grow dramatically. Everyone's like, I can't believe Caitlin Clark's making $75,000. Well, the industry she works in makes no money. Like, what do you think's going on? The investment banker at 25 makes $150,000. Well, yeah, he works for Chase Bank. They're printing cash. And this is why does Tatum make $50 million? Because the NBA makes whatever, $5 billion. I've never understood people screaming about salaries or equality of pay in terms of sports. Like, it's pretty black and white. Like, it's all based on revenue. How most industries are. I can't speak to everyone, but I'm with you. I mean, I'm rooting for Caitlin Clark to succeed. Not because I care about the WNBA, because I think she's an interesting story. And if she is awesome and a superstar, I'll pay attention. Just like I'm sure many people listening. It doesn't mean I'm going to watch every one of her dribbles, but the more and more, they've never had me. And I'm a diehard. I've literally dedicated my life talking about and working in sports, and they've never had me. And now they finally get me, and people go on television and like start pushing back against her. I'm like, God, you guys are such morons. You guys, if any of you guys ran a business, all of you would be out of it. You guys would go bankrupt. And it just shows you, like, they've been, the NBA give David Stern credit for creating this and Adam Silver for promoting it, but you need star power, and she is that. So the charter flights, like, that was another story. It's like, yeah, they don't have charter flights. What business that doesn't make any money charters flights? Elizabeth Thanos, SBF, even though he actually was sneaky making money, he was just also siphoning money. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, I'd love to fly private too. Don't make enough to do that. So I'll get on Southwest for $150.